Here. Are you ready?
Are you going to approve the minutes from last time?
Yeah, me and her,
Just the two of you?
Just two, I'll pass it.
That enough?
Are we ready?
We're on.
We're on?
Yeah.
Good afternoon. This is the regular meeting of Historic Preservation Commission on Monday, October 27, 2008, and the time is 2:10. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Adrian,
Here?
Commissioner Amirian, Commissioner Landrigan,
Here.
Commissioner Stepanian, Chairperson Mardian.
Here. Report regarding posting of the agenda. The agenda of this meeting was posted on or before Tuesday, October 21st, 2008, on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Next is approval of minutes, August 25th, 2008, regular.
Do you have any changes?
I don't have any changes, and I think
either.
I'll,
Do we have a...
I can pass the gavel and George, and we can...
Oh, do I have an approval? Do I have an approval of the minutes?
So move.
Seconded.
Yes.
Commissioner Adrian,
Abstain.
Commissioner Landrigan,
Yes.
Chairperson Mardian.
Yes. Okay. Oral communication. I don't see anybody from oral communication unless Arlene would... No? Okay. Okay. No oral communication, we'll close that. Old business. A. Proposed Cottage Grove Historic District review of historic resource survey and authorization of the petition requesting historic district overlay zone change.
Well, I'm pleased to say that we are at the point where we now have two historic districts moving through our designation process after the recent news about Royal Boulevard. And today we are hearing the Cottage Grove Historic Resource Survey, which was prepared for the city by Galvin Preservation Associates. And today the Commission is considering two aspects of this. The first is whether they agree with the findings of this report, and if they do so, whether they want to proceed with authorizing the residents of the Cottage Grove neighborhood to distribute a petition requesting that the city designate the historic district overlay. Today we have Christine Taniguchi, who is with Galvin Preservation Associates and was very involved with this project, and she has a presentation. Christine, just give me a signal and I'll forward through.
Thank you very much, Jay, and hello. Jay?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, that was a little awkward. I'd like to start by pointing out the location of this district. It's in the southeast section of Glendale, and basically this consists of residential properties that face onto Cottage Grove Avenue, and you see the red boundary of outline of the district. Basically, it's about a block long, and the northern boundary being close to East Palmer Avenue and Green Street being to the south. And basically, Briar Lane is perpendicular to and ends into Cottage Grove Avenue. You see here some residences typical in the district area. Generally, these are modest single-family residences. There's also a duplex. These were built primarily between 1924 and 1928. Most of the buildings here are Tudor Revival style, although there are a few Spanish Colonial Revival style as well. There is, however, one 1901 folk Victorian farmhouse, which has craftsman windows, so it has sort of a craftsman appearance. There's also a 1937 minimal traditional style residence within the district boundary. Now, typical of this period, each residence has a detached 1- or 2-car garage that matches the architectural style of the residence it's associated with. In addition to the residences themselves, typical of residential development of the time, you see the concrete light standard on the upper left. It has sort of the typical acorn-shaped luminaire on the top. There's a couple of these still remaining within the district. In the center, you see some of the original concrete, and to the right, you see a stamp, actually, of the concrete contractor who was J.W. Henderson, and he was a Glendale-based contractor who created the concrete. And maybe perhaps a little bit atypical of residential development is the alley that you see on the bottom left. This is actually perpendicular to Cottage Grove Avenue, kind of goes across it, and made out of concrete. It's basically used to address flooding issues, which were pretty severe in Glendale before 1940. Now, actually, sorry about that, Mike. And to the bottom right, you see an inlet covered by a steel grate, which leads into an LA flood control district drain pipe, and it's basically on the west end of that alley. And now, the history of the built environment of this area really begins with Helene Ungerland and her farmhouse built in 1901. This was the first residence built in the district area at a time when this area was still agricultural. However, the area was finally developed into individual parcels and developed for residences in the 1920s when it became the Tract 7436 subdivision. Now, the primary developers of this, the initial developers of this subdivision were Harry Preston and John Fox, who together were the Fox brothers. And they had a concept, as you can see through this advertisement that was in a local newspaper, of creating an English village-themed development. So obviously the Tudor Revival style was ideal for their vision. And Cottage Grove is actually, as I said, in the southeast section of Glendale, and at that time there were at least a couple of other developments going on at the same time or earlier, such as Glendale Heights and Acacia Hills. Okay, the period significance was determined to be between 1901 and 1928, and the reasoning behind this is, first off, of course, there's a 1901 folk Victorian-style farmhouse, which was the first house to be built along Cottage Grove Avenue before the parcel development. Its original owner, as I'd mentioned, was Helene Ungerland, who had created the Ungerland subdivision, which was one of the earlier developed subdivisions of that area. And the house was also lived in by John Fox, one of the Fox brothers, in 1925, during a time when the development of this tract was at its height. And 1928 is used as the closing date for the period of significance because that was the year that the last house was constructed as part of the initial development of this tract. Okay, in terms of what we did, we studied this district, comparing it against criteria at the local, state, and federal levels. We found that the district was not eligible for California Register or National Register. However, we found that it is locally eligible under City of Glendale Criterion G as being reflective of the settlement and growth in the southeast section of Glendale before the Depression and the city's transformation from agrarian to a suburban community, and also under Criterion H for having a good grouping of 1920s homes in the two dominant period revival styles found in Glendale at the time, Tudor Revival and Spanish Colonial Revival. So within this district, you see on the right-hand side of this image, the red outline, of course, is again for the district itself, and the non-red areas are the 13 contributors for this district. And so under California Historical Resources Status Code, these properties individually have 5D3. In other words, appears to be a contributor to a district that appears eligible for local listing or designation through survey evaluation. And the one red hatched area is the one non-contributor within this district, which was given a status code of 6Z. In other words, found ineligible for National Register, California Register, or local designation through survey evaluation. And that's the one minimal traditional style house that I'd mentioned earlier, built in 1937, having been constructed outside the period of significance. So this basically brings the total number of contributors within the district to be 93%, which meets the minimum 60% threshold for the city. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
If you don't have any questions,
I have one quick,
Yes.
just a curiosity question.
Yes.
Why was it that you found that it wasn't eligible for California National Register royalty? Is there a reason for that?
Well, it had to do with the size of the district and also the number of, it's basically had a lot to do with the size of the district, I think.
The number
Yes.
of dwellings?
For buildings and in terms of the cohesiveness of the district at that level, yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I have one question.
Yes, of course.
Back to the period of significance.
Yes.
On the minimal traditional, just the fact that it was in 1937, it's not part of this period.
Yes.
You rated as Z6, but the folk Victorian, due to its alteration, you still rated at 5D3.
That is because, the alterations are still part of the period of significance.
Okay.
And then also, that building was associated with Ungerland and the subdivision, and it was the first house built within that area, and also has a connection to John Fox, who was one of the Fox brothers who developed it. He lived in that house. Whereas the 1937 residence, that is constructed, way after all the initial
but
development
if I could
of
just
that area.
clarify,
Thank you.
there's an error on the DPR form you're looking at. That should be a 6L rather than a 6Z for 1220 Cottage Grove. And these are kind of arcane state designations, but 6L means officially that it is given special consideration in the planning process. So as a non-contributing building in a district, we still look at it using the guidelines.
You still look at, okay, that was my next question, whether
Oh.
this would be part of it. Thank you very much. Any other questions, Commissioners? No? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I just wanted to let everyone on the commission know that last week we had a community meeting with the residents and owners of properties in Cottage Grove, and about 4 people came, and the purpose of these meetings is specifically to capture small errors like the one we just noted. It's inevitable in a survey of any size that there's going to be some inconsistencies or errors. We try to capture as many of them before the official approval of the district is made. And in the case of this meeting, we did encounter a few fairly minor corrections that are going to be made at staff level to the DPR forms. An example would be the fact that a chimney on one of the houses wasn't noted, but it's definitely there. We did, however, note 2 relatively they're not major changes because they don't ultimately affect any of the decision-making, any of the contributing status or the period of significance. But on 2 of the maps you have copies of Figures 8 and Figure 11, and it turns out there was some conflicting information about the historic boundary lines for the subdivisions that were made. And so we kind of made a decision just earlier this week to go with what was clearly, to me, the best evidence. And so those corrections are made on the 2 pages that you're looking at. What this ultimately does, if we look at first of all, the Ungerland subdivision was actually larger than it was shown in the report you reviewed. It extends up the hill toward Forest Lawn into some of the currently undeveloped areas on the hillside. If we look at the original 7436, the Fox Brothers subdivision, in the report that you reviewed, it ended at Reynolds on the east side of Reynolds Court, and when we looked at the historic documentation, it actually extended to the west side. So there are 3 more parcels that are included. And what we're going to do in terms of how this affects the report is where we talk about the sections of future recommendations in case someone came to us in the future and said, we'd like to expand this district. We believe the appropriate boundary line would then extend to the west side of Reynolds. Reynolds Court.
Those 3 parcels?
Yeah. So it would encompass 7 parcels instead of 4 that were noted in the report.
7 parcels?
total, if it were expanded. The current district stands, this doesn't affect any of the decision-making about the 14 parcels that are under consideration today. It's more just for the historic background to the neighborhood.
Yeah. Okay.
And also will be, if you have noted any inconsistencies or concerns with the report, you're reviewing the final draft, not the final, so anything that you tell me today will be incorporated into that.
One question, Jay.
Mm-hmm.
I know the PDR is not clear. Do you recall or know the number, how many one-car garage these houses have? I mean, how many houses with one-car garage?
As I understand it, each car has a garage. I'm not sure if they're all one car. Some might be two-car garages. Yeah. So it's a mixture of one car and two car. For the most part, all of the garages were built at the same time as the houses and have the same architectural style as the house. So.
They all seem to be two.
The report says mostly ones, that's why I wasn't sure. Okay.
Jay, I got
Any
a question.
questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead.
I have a question to staff.
Adrian.
What is the address for the first home that was built?
It's 1208 Cottage Grove.
1208. That's the farmhouse.
It's the farmhouse.
1208. 1208. Okay, got it.
That's right.
Okay. Jay, before
Yes.
the lampposts are part of our review?
Yes.
Okay.
There are two historic lampposts that date to the early period. Yes.
Go ahead,
And would the
Commissioner
concrete
Rodriguez.
be part of our review too, since it's stamped by the builder? Is that going to,
I don't know. I think it's an interesting piece of historic information. I don't know that we're going to be overly concerned about that.
although, it's kind of nice
That's a
having
good
those.
one.
No,
Well, I just thought I'd ask.
It was brought up
if
in
a stamped piece of concrete became a hazard, I'm not sure
Well,
we
this
can
will-
fight it.
the crack.
Right.
No, we're not going to let the concrete go, huh? Okay, we'll open any other questions, Mr. Stefanian?
One question. Were there no significant trees or any of the plants that were existing at that time that,
Not that we know of. Generally, we don't designate landscaping unless we know that it was specifically designed as part of the design of either the building or the district. And here, we don't have any indication.
okay, just thought I'd ask.
Mm,
You're speaking of street trees?
I'm talking about maybe there were some design criteria that they included as part of their tutor
We ask our consultants when they look at districts to consider the possibility that an individual house might have, symmetrically planted palms or something that would definitely be part of the character.
that was appropriate.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to public. We'll open the public hearing. I'm going to go to the applicant first, if you don't mind. Federico Nunes? Would you like to say anything? Federico, I need you to come up, state your name and address, and
My name is Federico Nunez, 1212 Cottage Grove. I thank you very much for what you're doing. Really appreciate it, and I know my neighbors do too.
thank you very much. Now, let me refresh my memory. The house with the red door.
Excuse me,
The red door is your house, the one with the red door?
that's the one.
That's the one.
I know.
Good memory.
You told me about that. I'd never take it down.
No, don't take it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, let's go to another applicant, Utabon.
And don't forget you have the red steps, too.
Yeah.
Good afternoon,
afternoon.
commissioners and city staff. My name is Ute Baum, and I represent two of the houses in the district, 1208 and 1205. So the other night, we actually had 5 people in attendance, not 4.
That's right.
And I'm so happy to see that I have made a full circle in that I was born on a farm, and I'm living in a farmhouse again. Great. So I am just thrilled to read the survey that Galpin Associates has come up with, but I'm not surprised because I have lived in the area several decades, as you might know, And years prior to that, years prior to our Adams Square visioning tour, at which Arlene and I met, and we started talking about it, I had this gleam in my eye that Cottage Grove would be a perfect little street for a historic district. It's not the largest, but it is packed full of little cottages, Tudor-style cottages, which I think are very unique, and I think they're worth preserving. Let's see what else. I've brought a couple of people with me. I hope you will also see the value of the preservation of our little street and will vote for a go-ahead. We've been at this almost a year and a half now and hope to proceed with full speed ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll go to Norma Hackett? Hackett? Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry.
We're over there taking care of, my house is on the corner of Green, below 1224. It's one of the Spanish homes. My parents bought it in 1947. They live there. They have passed on. My husband Malcolm and I have lived there, and now my granddaughter, my grandson live there. 4 generations. But my husband used to sit in the dining room window and look down the street, and he'd say, there's no place like this. I just love sitting here and looking at all these houses. So, honey, you were way ahead of everybody, weren't you? So, anyway, I hope you'll go for it for us. It's a great street, and it's special in my heart.
Thank you. Thank you. Malcolm? Hackett? Hackett? Okay. Thank you.
Hackett.
Yes.
I'm the guy who looks out the window.
Right. You got a platform there. You can see better.
Well, we're at the end of the street, and the dining room has windows on the north end and west end, so I can see all the way down the street. It's really a great little street. It's like a movie set, actually. I used to tell my wife all the time. We got married in '92, and I moved in with her dad. She said earlier about the house in '28, so it's got a lot of great memories in it for me and for my wife. So I like the idea of making it into a historical unit. Thank you very much for your dedication and your work toward it. It's really appreciated.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hackett. Arlene Vidor?
Hi, my name is Arlene Vidor, and I'm a supportive neighbor from Marion Drive in the Adams Hill neighborhood, and I have to say that these lovely people are the reason that I love living in my neighborhood. And it is a street that I have to say a lot of us, not just the lucky folks who live on the street, are proud of, but a lot of people in the neighborhood are really proud of that street and the neighborhood in general. But it certainly should be a historic district because it does embody the charm and I think the intention of the early developers to develop something that, evoked maybe their life in the past or something that was familiar to them from another era. So, and this neighborhood has such great continuity, and it is so charming that, the only thing I can say is, small is beautiful, and this is a beautiful small neighborhood, and thank you very much for bringing us up to this important point.
Thank you very much. And also, Arlene, I want to take the opportunity at this time to thank you for the modern tour. Thank you. It was wonderful. All right, I have no other... Sure, go ahead. Come on up.
You pointed out about the one neighbor whose property was a non-contributor, and I'm all of a sudden getting a little worried that I hope this is not going to happen, but that they might not want to be part of this historical district, and hopefully we'll have enough signatures. I'm pretty sure we will have, but I was just thinking that they might get upset at that, being the only property on the block that doesn't contribute. I mean, I understand the reasoning for it. It's just a little concern I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
You should also, there were also several email support letters submitted.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks, Jay. I was going to, you caught me to it. Do you want me to mention their names? Or?
None necessarily. Your call.
Yeah, I have about 5 individuals in support of the Historic District Overlay Zone. Thank you. We'll close the public hearing. I'll take any questions, comments, or anything my commissioners have to say. I'll start with you, Mr. Thomas.
Well, I'm very proud to be part of the group of people here that I can just kind of preserve the part of the cities that it's really needed to be preserved, not to be ruined by some people to just destroy the district by building like different shaped houses on the property. So I'm glad to be here so I can preserve this district for you guys.
Thank you. Commissioner Leonard?
Sure. I think this is really a wonderful use of the historic guidelines and districting, because it preserves intact an area that has managed to keep its little personal character and integrity. And I really commend you for the hard work you all have done. We're just here to move it on, and you all have done all of the work, and you have preserved it. I mean, it is because of your thoughtfulness and your caring about your neighborhood that it's able to be in the state it is and to come to us. So that's the kind of, personal character of the communities of Glendale that this was made to preserve. And we're here to follow up on that, and I'm just delighted that it was such a nice survey and it supported so much. And I look forward to us seeing the survey go through the next process.
Thank you. Commissioner Adrian?
Well, I just want to echo those same sentiments. I think it's a wonderful little community in itself. And Ms. Fedor mentioned that the smallness is so quaint and it's sort of theatrical, and Mr. Hacker mentioned something about that. So I'll concur with those comments also. Yeah, I think we're just sort of a vehicle right now. We'll just keep it moving. I think it'll be great. And I don't think you have any trouble getting your signatures and your approvals. It's beautiful. We should have more like it. It's great. Thank you. Thanks for coming in and commenting on your neighborhood.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have a couple of questions to Jay before I make my comments. Jay, back to the one-car garage, because, as you know, I just want to mention it to the public, even though maybe this is too early, you're limited to add any square footage if you have one-car garage.
You're not limited. There's a different level of review if you go over 500 square feet in terms of an addition. Mandatory Preservation Commission review. It could be exempt if it were smaller than that for a garage structure.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the zoning rule says anything over 100 square feet requires an administrative exception, or up to 100 without providing any additional...
Chairman Mardian, I believe you're referring to provisions of the zoning code citywide as opposed to the specifics of the historic district ordinance. Am I correct in where you're thinking?
Then you're saying that they could add additional square footage without providing...
No, the provisions of the underlying zoning code provisions remain in effect.
Right, okay.
So if your understanding of the code is correct, you're correct. Put it that way.
I just want to mention that because there's limited alteration or additions that are going to take place on these areas.
If I may, I think, though, that is 100 square feet to the front.
No, 250 square feet, or 200. Then you go to commission. Sorry.
Well, you're on that same advisory commission, so that's where I thought it had gone to. So you must be right, because you have to enforce it.
All right. Other question is the window changes. Now, all these homes have window change-outs, correct? Most of them.
Many of them, yeah.
So in the future, I'm assuming this goes through, and we're supporting all this. If they come back for changes again, which windows are we going to go by?
Well, we would go with what we believe. We would work toward going to what's historically appropriate. We can't say in every situation that it's going to have to be a wood window versus who knows what we'll have in 20 years in terms of things that look just like wood windows. But the idea is that incrementally we'll be returning houses to something closer to their historic appearance. And with these styles, we have a lot of precedent in Glendale to have a pretty good understanding of what that means.
Okay. All of those questions, I'm going to say my comments. I think this is a beautiful street. It has cohesiveness. I am in support of this. I think they're little architectural gems due to the sizes and all that. I mean, they're all unique, even despite all the alterations. And I'm in support of it, and I'll take a motion or questions before we take a vote.
I move that we approve the report as presented and direct the planning department to proceed with the next step of the process. Is that the correct motion?
To authorize
Authorize.
distribution of the petition. Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Before I get a second, Jay, I forgot, any petitions opposing this application at this point?
No, we have no opposition petition.
Okay. And we're going with the two criterias, correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, that was my main question. Now, since we have majority of the...
Have a second before we further discuss it.
I'll have a second.
There was a motion.
Oh. I'll entertain a second.
I'll second the motion.
Second? Agree. Second or third, yeah. So can I say something about the signature? The reason I'm questioning this, I want to expedite these processes a little bit. I don't know if it's at this time we could discuss it or not. Since we have overwhelming support and signatures at this time on these applications, how many people? 10 people already signed for it?
11 signed the initial.
11 signed for it? Now, how could we go on trying to expedite it for a future applicant where there's, rather than getting another hearing to get a signature to 50%?
Well, as we've talked about before, the process was designed to have many steps with a lot of public input because there was so much concern about the earlier attempt to have historic districts. I think as we move forward, we're going to start seeing a lot of places where we could start streamlining as people become more comfortable with districts in the public and city government feels that the process is moving smoothly and fairly. So I think we could start compiling a list of places where we might think of streamlining things and look at that sometime in the future.
Okay, because I think in this case, we could save that time period.
Just to mention, Chairman Mardian, the process as it stands, the number of hearings, that process, the petition process is all outlined, as you know, in the historic district ordinance. So changing that would require changing the zoning code and hearings in front of the Planning Commission and ultimately a vote by the City Council. So it's not a simple process.
Not a simple process.
To change the
I was trying
if we go forward,
Neither was the first districting guidelines.
Good
point.
Royal took 18 months to get through where we are. Okay, we'll roll call.
Commissioner Adrian?
Yes.
Commissioner Landrigan?
Yes.
Commissioner Stepanian?
Yes.
Chairperson Mardian?
Yes. Okay. Next item, new business. And thank you very much for coming, keeping Tropical alive. I guess number 6, new business. A, 1428 Imperial Drive, Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act contract application.
Okay, I'll make a quick presentation about this nomination for 1428 Imperial Drive. We're located in the Rossmoyne area historically, but if you look closely at this map, it actually shows that we're in the Greenbrier neighborhood, and this reflects the split between the earliest phase of Rossmoyne development and the later, the Royal Boulevard era of Rossmoyne development. This doesn't have any impact on the designation.
Excuse me 1 second,
Yes.
Jay. May I interrupt you just for one moment and ask a quick question?
Sure.
Is it possible to put in one of these little maps in your package next time you do one of these presentations to us? Helpful. Thank you, Jay.
No problem.
Go ahead.
So You can see where this red dot is representing the house, that it actually has 3 street frontages. Its primary fronts are on Imperial and then on a little street called Toledo Drive, and then its rear facade fronts onto Torres Drive. And here we are looking at the house, which was built in 1930. We don't know the architect, but it really captures a lot of the kind of quintessential features of some of the fine Spanish colonial revival designs we have in Glendale. In terms of its composition, it's fairly simple, L-shaped 2-story building, but it has a lot of kind of additional details that kind of make it special. And this is in a neighborhood where we have a phenomenal number of good examples of Spanish colonial. One of the most interesting things about the site is that it was built on 2 lots. So it has a very large private garden space. And if you look at the picture on the right side, I think it's interesting that the owners have actually given some public attention to the public gardens that are on the street side of that wall. So you really have this sense of kind of luxurious vegetation around the house. It's also notable for the large number of palm trees that are growing on the site. If we look at this, the house was built in 1930, and if you remember from all of our Royal Boulevard historic information about the Haddock Nibley Company that developed Ross Moyne at the beginning, and then the Ross Moyne Village Inc. that took over later in the 30s, this is an advertisement from 1936 by Ross Moyne Village Inc. So this house was already built by the previous developer, but you can see it was featured in this ad, and I think it's kind of cool when you look at the ad side by side with the existing view that we're pretty much looking, you know, obviously there's some changes, there's the garden wall running around the perimeter, but the neighborhood still has some of the same feel with a lot more green. Here's the rear side of the house with the garages facing onto Torres. And here are some of the just kind of the nice details that the house has, this covered second floor balcony. And one of the things that I think is most interesting architecturally are these wood spindles that form kind of a security grill at the living room windows. They're called rejas in Spanish, so it's kind of a traditional Spanish colonial form. And I haven't seen it, I've seen it in a few other houses, but it's not common. And then especially with these chamfered windows, it really caught my eye and gives that part of the house a special character. The house is nominated, and we believe staff believes that it meets 2 of the Glendale criteria. Criterion D for its architectural significance as a fine example of Spanish colonial revival, but also for its association with Charles Wellman. Wellman did not build the house. He only lived in the house from 1952 to 1960, or from 1957 to 1962. At first, I wasn't sure when the applicants came in and said Charlie Wellman was a significant figure, whether that was true. And the applicants did a tremendous amount of research into his doings in Glendale and around the country, and pretty much convinced me that I could make a staff report saying that it's significant for association with Wellman. He was executive vice president of Glendale Federal Bank during its period of great growth in the mid-50s. It went from being pretty much a local kind of institution into a nationally important one. And he went on to, through his reputation in the savings and loan industry and finance in general, to be a consultant or sit on committees of all sorts. So I've thrown together a few of the headlines here, but he worked locally, sitting on a school committee, talking about the economy of the schools, looking at the city's finances. He was on the parking commission in Glendale. He represented Glendale for the Southland Water Group. And then looking at him on a national scale, he was called by the Secretary of the Treasury to testify on interest rates. He was a delegate to the 1960 National Convention. He actually was part of a small group that served as advisors directly to President Kennedy. And for me, the kicker was like, you know, he had an article about him in Time Magazine and an obituary in Time Magazine. And I don't know that a lot of Glendale business people really made it to this level of national recognition. The house has undergone a few alterations. I've toured the entire site, and in my opinion, they haven't taken away from the overall character and the period appearance of the house. I just want to draw your attention to some of them. The ones on this slide were all made by Charles Wellman during his period of residence. If you look at the top, the enclosed porch was originally an open porch. So windows with true divided light muntins were installed at the formerly open porch. The lower left was originally an open kind of loggia. I'm not sure that I quite understand, but it was kind of an interior patio open to the air. And the current owners, Charlie Wellman actually enclosed that, and the current owners installed the doors that you see today. And then during the Wellman era, a pool was also installed in the large garden on the south side on the part of the double lot. And then a few relatively, well, I can't say minor, a few other additions have been made more by the current owners in recent years. The front court area was enclosed by the low wall, and the circular bench was put around the tree in the courtyard. The tree appears to date to the construction of the house, or is definitely an earlier tree. Some of the decorative tile work was also added around the front door, and then at the lower right, you see there's a second-floor balcony at kind of the rear corner of the house that kind of echoes the enclosed balcony. Tiles were put along the base of that. And then the house features all of its original steel casement windows except for this kitchen bay window, which is kind of behind the perimeter wall that you saw in the one picture. These are actually aluminum windows. If we could get everyone in Glendale to put in aluminum windows of this quality, I think we wouldn't have some of our window problems. They definitely have the appearance of a different kind of window. Mm-hmm. That is it for my presentation. If you have any questions.
Any questions, commissioners?
I have a couple of questions for Jay. I assume the owners are here?
Yes.
Today?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they...
Either we can introduce them.
Defer your answers if you want to them.
Sure. We'll do that once we go to the public hearing.
I'll wait till... I'll talk to you.
We'll
I think it'll be easier for maybe them.
Either way.
Sure.
Any question, Commissioner Stefani?
Well, I do have an... I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Did you have said that you have a question? I'm sorry. Tell me, I feel kind of like the third wheel. I didn't get a chance to really get up to see the house and get out and walk around it, and I apologize. But I saw these photos, and I was just so kind of like in awe when I saw them. The house just looks fantastic, like it was built just like yesterday. And I just wanted to ask Jay, are the photos as indicative of what you actually, in the flesh, if I was up there, would I be seeing or appreciating the house just as much? Or
well, I took most of the photos you're looking at, and I'm not a good photographer, so I think they actually show what's up there.
Good. Yeah. Good. Okay, I
can vouch for that.
Okay, fine. If my colleagues all feel...
Are you vouching for Jay?
I was very impressed.
You're vouching for Jay's bad photography skills.
Both the subject matter and the photography work is great. Okay, that's all I got to say.
Commissioner Landrigan, any questions?
No questions.
I'm sorry, I have to ask my questions. Because past workshops we had, even though Charles Wellman was this overwhelming history about him and how he contributed to the history of Glendale, would you say 6 years is a valid reason to qualify him? Because I thought he would have had to be in the peak of his career.
Well, he was at the peak of his career in Glendale. He was executive vice president of Glendale Federal until 1962, which is the year he left the House. So really the years he was in the House from 57 to 62, I think represents the key period when he was serving on these committees, advising, he was there for the Democratic National Convention. Usually you would hope there would be a longer history with the House, but I think his significant years in the history of Glendale coincide with his time in the House.
Okay. And just another question right now, I'll ask the applicant, are these window change-outs and all that done by permit?
I haven't checked the permit history, so you'll have to ask.
I didn't see it in here, but I'll open to any other questions before I open?
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
There are some historical places where the historical figure has only slept there, so I think 6 years might be okay.
For more than one night? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, you got that? Yeah, all right.
Need to find out where Leslie Brand was sleeping.
Referring to Paul.
Oh, she's testing my knowledge. All right. We'll go to the owner.
Okay.
I have both of them here, Charla Bowman and Mark Bowman.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mark Bowman, owner of the property. My wife, Charlotte Bowman.
Nice to meet you all.
Thank you, Jay.
Certainly.
We appreciate that. Thank you, Commission. First, I guess we'll keep it brief. I know your time is valuable. One of the things I wanted to mention is when we moved, and actually when we discovered the neighborhood here, we immediately fell in love with it. We didn't realize all that Glendale had to offer as we started looking for a larger family home. We have two smaller children, and we decided to to look for a place where we could live and have our children grow up and live in a community. And it's promised to be everything that we'd hoped for as we've been living there now for about 4 years. We love the neighborhood, the people, the architecture is certainly quite unique. And we're very hopeful that we have an opportunity to keep the unity and keep the integrity of our neighborhood as it stands. Our home is the only place where we can do that. So we've been working with Jay to look at a way in which we can keep the integrity of the home there for many generations to come. We feel like it's quite unique, and we, as we look around the neighborhood, we see occasionally someone doing a little something here or there where it starts to slide, and you go, some decisions are made where you feel like some things are compromised. We're hopeful that we've done justice to the house and some of the just really cleanup and renovation that we've done to the home. It's very much as it stood in 1930. And as Jay mentioned, Mr. Wellman did the majority of the significant upgrades. And as we dove in, and my wife should be credited for the PI work, she really found so many interesting articles on Mr. Wellman, and we thought that not only do we have a unique architectural Glendale home built in 1930 in what we think is a very unique neighborhood that is a gem here in Glendale, Mr. Wellman is a fascinating character both on a local and national level. So we certainly appreciate your time and consideration of this. We're thrilled to have an opportunity to review this today and to have your eyes on it. And is there anything you want to say? Yeah. We just appreciate your time, and we'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions? You had a question, Mr. Adrian.
A couple of quick questions.
Sure.
Now, I was going to ask you about the tile work. Is that all original tile work on the building, the face of the building?
No, the exterior tile work is reproduction Malibu and Catalina tiles. So while they aren't period pieces, they're period designs. So they're all architecturally correct to the 20s and 30s.
Let me ask you now,
Yes.
You've lived in the house for a long time, or did you find...
About 4 years.
4 years. And these upgrades were done by you or by the previous owners?
Yes, the courtyard, as Jay mentioned, top left photo, that was enclosed by us. Someone had done kind of a poor job of adding several sidewalks in, and so we tried to give more continuity from the street and put terracotta pavers in and some of the art tile to bring it back to...
Did you repaint the house also in doing this?
It's always been painted this color, and yes, we have painted it.
Okay.
So it has newer paint.
Okay. I was just curious about the... I'm getting kind of...
It's okay.
Crunchy.
I wasn't going to use that word.
Oh, all right.
We love to talk about our house, so if you have time...
Well, the reason I was asking if you were doing the upgrades or you bought the house this way is because these questions kind of all stem to that. The Rojas, they're called?
Yes.
Am I pronouncing it right?
Rejas.
Rejas. In this photo with the chamfered window, the color of those, it's kind of a aqua color.
Yeah.
Is that something that you introduced, or was that the way it was?
That is something that we introduced.
Is that necessarily considered, does that depict the era, or is that just something you wanted to kind
I
of...
think that the teal
work
color
with?
was commonly used in the Spanish Revival period against a white or cream facade.
But you sort of extended the color
Yeah.
spectrum a little bit there.
Yeah, I suppose. I use...
I mean, if you were to buy this...
It's like an aqua green, and maybe this is a little...
like a peacock blue.
Yeah, it's
Kind of that.
Okay.
somewhere in that family.
That green is also carried on the porch.
Am I...
On the covered
Well, I noticed
porch
that
in
some of the
back.
tile work has got this same color. I thought maybe you were trying to play that in a little bit to it. That's the reason. Some tiles around the tree there are also that quite aqua color.
That olive tree is actually part of the original grove that was part of the development, and has survived to this day.
That's what I was, I thought that was an olive tree.
The feature.
I wasn't sure if it was olive or oak.
Olive tree.
Yeah, we have a photo of the neighborhood in the 27, and it's a small grove of olives all right in
Do they drop a lot? Do you have a lot of trouble with that tree?
Well, we do
You
have
kind
a
of
little
clean
bit of
around the base of that
cleanup, a little
tree?
bit of cleanup.
But in
Messy
the
one.
1927 photo that we have, the palms on Royal are, you know.
Really?
They're all like the new planted
Yeah.
ones, yeah, exactly.
That's so funny.
And you installed that kitchen window, right?
That is correct.
The aluminum cladded or bronze anodized
That's
aluminum
right.
window.
Mahogany interior.
Mahogany inside. Okay.
Commissioner Landrigan?
That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I had a question. I just suggest that you get the permits for these windows, just for your, it's not a big process. I think Jay already knows. Yeah, you have to see him anyway.
Did we verify that we don't have permits?
We do not have permits
Okay.
on those windows and the doors that were added, but
Right.
the doors are certain, those doors and windows are all up to code, so that is something that we'd be more than happy to.
But the arch was,
The arch doors.
was the arch there before?
No, those were French doors there before that had significant damage.
Okay.
So we replaced those with that arch radius top.
Next question, the garage door, was that there before? Because that has been changed too.
Garage door has been changed as well. Yeah, those were a real heavy door that was quite dangerous. So we updated those as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for allowing us to see your home. I had the pleasure of seeing it myself. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Any questions? Public hearing is closed. Any discussion?
The only
Just
discussion
have a suggestion about that aqua color, if they continue on some part of it on the railing or some other places, I think it would be more interesting, because the only place I can notice is that carved wood on the corner. But on the balcony, there's some railing. If you continue that color to certain parts of the house, I think it would be interesting to my knowledge.
Thank you. Commissioner Landrigan?
I think this is just a stunning house, and you've done a fabulous job. I love the courtyard's really in keeping with it. The olive tree, God bless you for keeping it, because it is a really messy tree, but it's a great tree, and it really has a lot of history in Glendale, so I'm really glad that you chose to keep it. I love olives, but it is true they do drop their fruit, and it's... I think you've done a great job, and on Imperial, it's one of the houses that I've always kind of favored as I would drive by, and I'm really delighted that you're taking the time to set it in history and give it its place on our register, because it's certainly one of our stellar pieces of the Spanish colonial period.
Thank you. I echo my colleagues. I think this is a wonderful house and its location. I think I can make the significance criteria. I think Wellman was an overwhelming. He had a career that I don't think I got everything. I didn't read every single one of, but the career is amazing. I think I would just designate it on that part. Now, one question I have to Jay now, this is visible from three sides.
Yes.
So anything they do on the three sides, you have to see it, or we have to see it.
For the Glendale Register, we look at the exterior envelope,
Okay.
but focus on the primary facades and more give advice on the secondaries. So, but yeah, we'll look at all street facades.
It's got three streets.
Okay. Those row houses, is that on the visible side?
One of them is.
One of them is, yeah.
And the other one's in the backyard.
I'm not happy with the color. I'll be real honest. I guess that was my only pet peeve. It's a beautiful house. Heck, it's probably overshadowed by everything else, but...
That should not take it out of the designation.
No, I wouldn't dare, but if you ever get the urge to do something else, I mean,
I don't think we were going to, if we go that color, we would.
Wouldn't do the color again.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to entertain a motion. I guess we need two motions, one for the Mills Act, one for the designation, correct?
Yes, sir.
I'll make a motion to approve this house for the Mills Act application.
Should designate first to the Mills Act.
Okay.
I designate this to Glendale Register. Make the motion. Put it on the Glendale
Second.
Register.
Any second? Second?
We have to vote on that now?
Did we take a roll call?
Yeah, we need a roll call.
Okay.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Adrian?
Yes?
Commissioner Landrigan?
Yes.
Commissioner Stepanian?
Yes.
Chairperson Mardian?
Yes. And the next motion is to Mills Act?
Make the motion to approve this for the Mills Act application?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Adrian?
Yes?
Commissioner Landrigan?
Yes.
Commissioner Stepanian?
Yes.
Chairperson Mardian?
Yes. Thank you. Next item is 6B, 721 East Mountain Street, Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act contract application. But before we go there, do you need a recess, anyone, or you're okay? Can we move on? Okay.
Oh, you asked for a recess?
Yeah, if you want a recess, or can we move on?
No, I'm good.
All right.
I'm
Can we
fine.
move on? Okay, we'll move on.
Thank you.
Okay.
Moving on. This is the last?
Well, no, we have some planning department updates after this. Okay.
No, fine.
Not
Okay.
too much. Okay, here we are in the Ross Moyne neighborhood for 721 East Mountain Street. Closing in, you can see that it's pretty much at the top of Geneva Street. As you're coming uphill on Geneva, you're going to see this house. And here it is, one of, I think, to my eye, one of the more unique houses that we have in terms of its style. We have many French-inspired houses in Glendale. It's not our predominant style, but throughout Ross Moyne particularly, and a few other neighborhoods, we have a number. But this one really was designed to be more of like a Norman keep, or more of a castle-looking house.
A chateau.
A chateau. It was built in 1926, and it retains pretty much most of its historic appearance, as far as I can tell. We don't know the architect, but you can see in terms of just the design detail from the kind of rusticated bumps that kind of give the stucco a rough kind of handmade texture, to the faux concrete surrounds around the windows, the real stone surround around the door, and then there's a similar, I don't know if you had a chance to see the house, there's another similar archway leading up to the garden. And I think the composition of the house, where the stair tower with its peaked roof is so dramatic, with the conical roof, and then it's balanced by the octagonal tower over on the left, and then set back even further is another partial octagonal bay that steps out from the northeast corner of the house, and that has some of the brackets that you see under the conical dome. So it's a very interesting composition. This house is nominated not only under Criterion D for its architectural character as one of the finest examples of the style in the neighborhood, but also as a visual icon of the neighborhood. It may not be widely known to every person in Glendale, but anyone who lives in the neighborhood supposedly has been calling it the Castle House for a long time, and certainly even a stranger driving up Geneva is going to notice this this house. Here are a few of the details on the back of the house that you don't see from the street. The current owner has done a lot to kind of keep the historic character intact. The house seemingly, as best I can tell, features all of its original wood windows. And I thought it was interesting, there's this little balcony that projects from the rear facade that I thought was intriguing. But then when you look at the light fixture, evidently a light fixture like this was found in the basement, but none of these exterior lights were in place when the current owner bought the house. And she actually arranged to have lamps made that kind of reflected this. And we can suppose that it was original to the house, but since it was found in the basement, we can't say for sure, but it certainly fits in with the overall appearance. And then here are just a few other features that kind of take what's ultimately a very simple stucco wall with punched window openings and gives it a little more texture and character. The wrought iron work around some of the windows on the octagonal bay at the front, and then also the exposed brick and the rusticated look of the chimney running up on the west side of the house. A few alterations have been made that we need to call out. On the left, you see this octagonal kind of turret bay that's at the second floor. It's at the southwest corner, the northwest corner of the house. It's not visible from the street, and it was added sometime in the last few years to kind of create a bathroom at the second floor level. And then the pavers that you see, this is looking down at the garage that actually is on the street level, so a terrace was put on top of the garage. And the kind of red clay pavers and some of the decorative tile work were added by the current owner. Originally, she thinks that there were stone stairs going up to the front door, so that may have been the treatment for some of the paved areas. But these pavers are used at the front and at the rear. But otherwise, those are the only alterations we know of. The owner was called away to jury duty today, but she has a representative here to express her interest. So come on up.
Thank you. Mr. James Aker?
James Aker. Yeah, I actually live with Heather. She's my significant other. She does apologize for being here. She had other civic duty that she wasn't planning on. The house, I guess mostly what's amazing about this house is we bought it at a time when we weren't into preservation necessarily. We bought the house because we loved it aesthetically by chance. And through the process of buying an older home, you become a preservationist. You buy this house from somebody who lived there for 40 years and you find out everything wonderful about the house and everything wrong with the house. So when you get to that process, you also start to realize, like, you look at certain things and you're like, that was always there. Lots of mahogany, the interior, lots of mahogany used throughout, Batchfelder tile fireplace, but you'd see a place where there'd be one sconce missing and another plate over the wall. So in the process of finding the right pieces to put this house back together, we became preservationists. We loved our house, and then we got crazy in love with our house. So I think the biggest reason that we're really interested in this is that through our process of trying to bring the house back to the period more and more, I think we got caught up in more of the romance than we already did of the neighborhood. It's quite beautiful. I mean, mountain. When people come over, they're like, "This is Glendale?" Because first, when you move to Glendale and you live in Hollywood, your cool friends go, "Why are you moving to Glendale?" And then they grow up and they come out to your house for dinner and they go, "Oh, I get why you moved to Glendale." And as a matter of fact, I have people who've moved in 3 or 4 blocks, away in our neighborhood because they love it so much. But we think what you're doing is important work because we really would love to see everybody in our neighborhood with a significant house be inspired to take much more pride and care of it. We're also afraid of a situation where one of my friends who was inspired to move to the area lives actually further down, like in Kenneth Village. He actually is in the Burbank area, bought a beautiful Spanish home, did much the same thing, and 2 doors away, they're very large lots. In the race for square footage, somebody's built a house that's basically left his and his neighbor's house in the shadow. And we certainly live in fear of that because we also have quite large lots to either side of us. Mostly thank you for considering us, and please inspire everybody else to do the same thing.
That's right. I was going to tell you to inspire your neighbors across the street, too. There's a few of them there, that Spanish revival. But I think you have a one-of-a-kind home here.
Thank you.
Yeah, haven't seen, and I drive by this street many times. My mother-in-law lives down the street.
I wasn't sure if I was going out on a limb saying that, but I think it's pretty true.
All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
I have a question.
You have a question? Go ahead, Mr. Adrian.
I have just a small question, just curiosity things. The chimney cap on this thing, is that something that was actually done as a retrofit situation?
I don't know any. Which chimney would you? That one right there. That chimney?
Yeah, the front chimney here. It's in the front.
Oh yeah.
I
have. If it was done, it would be prior to us. We definitely had the chimney, everything checked out when we had the inspection. Mm-hmm. It's solid. I don't think, I guess I'm amazed at a house this old that's been through.
Maybe the chimney was retrofitted.
Yeah, possibly. I don't know.
Way back when, and they added that.
Yeah, I have no knowledge of that.
Didn't know if that was.
You're talking about the cap, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It seems in keeping with French Revival to have those slightly sloping sides coming up. But I don't know what the material is.
The other question is, do you get plenty of exercise going up and down the stairs?
Well, here's what you find out. Well, the first thing is...
You have a lift inside.
No, we don't, actually. We talked about that. Could we talk about zoning that? Actually, I made the mistake of moving all the furniture in with a friend the first time we moved in, and now I vowed that we can never move because I don't want to carry it back out.
You'll have that friend.
I nearly killed him that day, but it bonded us.
Is that a stairwell in the very front? Is that...
Yeah, that's straight up. That's where the stairs are on the
That's the
side of the
stairs
garage.
there.
Yeah, and yeah, you count them every time you bring groceries home. You earn it. Anything you really choose your purchases wisely. And then when you get inside, of course, if it has to go to the top floor, there's 2 sets of circular stairs to get to the bedroom. So my wardrobe gets smaller and smaller.
Well, anyway, beautiful house.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll close the public hearing, and we'll entertain any discussions or a motion, or... No questions, no?
I'd like to say that it is a spectacular home. I have a friend who lives on Geneva, so whenever I come up to Mountain, I come straight up, and that's really the best way to see this house, is that it just keeps getting better and better as you get closer and closer. And it is so unique, and I've always called it the castle on Mountain. So it's beautiful, and I have also envied your little patio over your garage. I'd like to do the same thing with mine, but I don't think...
Like that was built in concrete when we bought it.
Well, it's very nicely hidden back there, but it makes it so much more functional when you're on a hillside like that. And very nice, and I'm really glad. I loved what you said, that when you bought it, you just were in love with your house, but you became a preservationist because you got crazy in love with your house. I think that's just a wonderful quote. I think that really is what happens when you start finding the specialness of your home. And
Thank you. One question, with this 2 lots? This sits on 2 lots, am I correct?
Yes, they bought part, I think 30 feet of the adjacent lot.
I read that
bought
in
in
the report, but I wasn't
1928.
sure.
yeah.
Okay. Which side is that?
So I think it's
The left side? Okay. Okay, I'll entertain a motion. Oh, I want to say, Michael, I think it's wonderful. This is, I don't mean to repeat what Jay said, but this is truly, I agree with you, it's one of a kind, and the setting is wonderful. And I'm very excited to support this one. Thank you very much. I'll entertain a motion, or 2 motions, actually. You want to make the motion?
Yes.
Okay. We have a motion, second.
Motion? Oh, a motion to add this to the Glendale Register?
Well, you have to second it.
Did you make that motion?
Yeah.
I'll second it. Sorry.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Adrian?
Yes.
Commissioner Landrigan?
yes.
Commissioner Stepanian?
Yes.
Chairperson Mardian?
Yes. And motion for the Mills Act?
yes.
Okay.
So moved.
Second, please.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Adrian?
Yes.
Commissioner Landrigan? Commissioner Stepanian? Chairperson Mardian?
Yes. One thing I want to mention, also the significant other is an Emmy Award-winning actress.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Stars are coming to Glendale.
Yeah.
and our speaker is in a well-known band. So.
Yeah. I forgot the band's name. I don't know if she mentioned it to me. Or... Okay. She's the star. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Excellent.
Next item, please. Planning Department updates and informational briefings.
Okay. Well, first we have exciting news from Manny Valenzuela, our dedicated Planning Department intern, about where we are on the Craftsman Survey and public accessibility.
Good afternoon, members of the Commission. Manny Valenzuela, Planning Intern, and I just wanted to give you a very brief update on our work post-Craftsman Survey. One of the parts of our 2006-2007 Craftsman Survey was to put all of the DPR forms online into a new database called CRID, which was developed with the help of the City of Ontario and the Office of Historic Preservation. And you can actually access it as we speak. It's the same address to go to the Glendale's main homepage, but all you do is add CRID first. And we are up, and it's safe to say, because I've talked to the Office of Historic Preservation, we are the first city to have this up.
Anywhere in the state.
Anywhere in the state. What I like to do is, I don't fill anything in, and I actually click search property, and you'll see all 1,100 of our, all of our DPR forms online.
I was going to say the first in the country, actually.
Well, people in other states aren't allowed to put stuff on the grid. But you're right, first in the universe.
Here we go, it's loading right now.
Oh, no, Jay.
And I want to note that I had tremendous help from not only Jay Platt, right here, our historic preservation planner, but Eric Kraus, our senior planner in the planning department, as well as Kevin Hobson of the IS department. He was a tremendous help in correcting any errors that we had on our end. But here we go. Anyone in the city of Glendale can look up their house if it so happens to be in the multifamily area of Glendale. And we can click on any random one. Let's see. Basically, it takes you to a resource summary page, which is really a reflection of the DPR form. And all you'd have to do is go to this 523A form, and you will see the DPR form that we have from the survey. Now, in the future, it will definitely become more handy, because what the Office of Historic Preservation wants to do is make it easier to submit these DPR forms to the state. So at some point in the future, we will be able to click one button and it will automatically send it to their main database. But as of now, that doesn't work yet. And that's it. We're up and running.
Go ahead.
On future surveys, then you will be able to give the surveyors a little flash drive. We can put it in our computer and type it right in instead of going through that, checking the handwritten stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And we already are in the process of adding another survey. We have Royal Boulevard that is getting entered in as we speak. It's not completed yet, but will be soon.
Yeah, the goal is to backfill this with, we have a substantial number of surveys over the years, so we want to kind of backfill with Cumberland Heights with a lot of the other surveys so that we have this all out publicly accessible. So.
Go ahead.
Will this be available then to the building department so that if a project or a property is being considered for any work, somebody would be able to pull this up and say, oh, we have this on our files and you need to do this?
That's a question for Jay.
Ultimately, currently we have a database with all of our surveyed properties in it. The coordination between us and the building department has just gotten better because we've merged our kind of permit tracking systems into the CSI system. So we're going to look to putting their various levels of notation in the system that you can put when something's been identified. For example, anything that's in a historic district that's been designated or on the Glendale Register has what's called a hard hold, meaning a permit can't be written for that without us making sure that we've signed off on it. We'll talk a bit more about that process in a bit. And then for things that have been surveyed, we can do something similar to just make sure everyone can see that there's another step they have to make before they write a permit. So.
Now, what's that step you're talking about? I mean, obviously, if somebody wants to do any work to this house, has to see the planning department, you kick him to design review board, correct?
Depending on the ranking in the survey, the house that Manny pulled up, I'm not sure would kind of rise to that level. What this does is use the California status codes to say which of the buildings that were surveyed are potentially eligible for the Glendale Register or at the California or the national level. If I don't think we have any that rose to those levels. And then certain properties are, if you have a craftsman that's been so stuccoed over an aluminum window that it really doesn't tell a story anymore, that's something that we don't take to any design review. We can exempt that and allow for demolition.
So if it's a 5D3 or... It
might be a contributor.
5S3 or 5D3, we will definitely have review over. 6L is the category, the special planning consideration, that will look at it and try to place it in its context, but we can't say that it's going to be with us forever necessarily, but it gives us that extra level of review where we can ask for a historic resource report if we think there may be something of additional interest that we could learn, or it could allow us to look at more kind of contextual neighborhood-based scenarios to see if it's more important that way.
Somebody, I'm going to ask you another, somebody wants to put a new building, I'm sure some of these are in the multifamily zones.
Yeah, they're all in multifamily
They're all in
zones.
multifamily zones. And somebody is asking for demolition, and if it's a 5D3, you ask them to do a historical resource analysis?
Yeah, it'll have to go through environmental review
An
since it's been
environmental?
identified. Yeah, not necessarily an EIR, but that's kind of...
The EIF?
It would be an EIF and possibly more.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just, is it not true that there were a significant number of 6Ls in the Craftsman survey? So that does mean that a lot of the projects that are, and properties that are there would be of concern or at least interest if any development was going to be done.
Yes. Yeah, the 6L, we don't see a way around that category at this point. It gives us another level of some protection. It makes us take a second look at a property. But in the initial assessment, we couldn't say that those homes would rise to the level of a Glendale Register eligible site.
So who would make the decision if somebody wants to demo it? The design review board? When it goes to the application?
I review demolition applications for properties over 30 years old when there's no project proposed for the site. If there is a project proposed for the site, it goes through the DRB process.
DRB process, okay. All right.
Thank you very much, guys.
Any questions? No. Thank
Great
you.
work.
Thank you, yeah.
Just, if I may, Manny, if you would read off actually the exact address, since it's probably hard to see on the screen, so people
Sure.
can write that down.
It's CRID, CHRID .ci .glendale.ca.us.
Thank you. That's very helpful information. Thank you. All right. We'll go to the next item, 7B. An update regarding HPC and planning staff role in processing application for work in a designated historic district.
Okay, as you all hopefully know, last week City Council voted to designate the Royal Boulevard Historic District. It isn't official for 30 days because it's an ordinance for zone change, so it will officially be a district on November 20th. What we are doing, both with the commission and then also in-house with staff, is kind of doing some educational work to prepare everyone for what is going to happen as soon as we start getting applications in. Because Royal's only 30 houses, we're not sure we're going to get, a huge influx of applications for work right away, but we want to make sure everyone's ready. So I put together this kind of two-page form for you that I could go through step by step if you'd like, just so that we're all on the same page. The basic gist of the review is that the whole historic district process was designed to make it as similar, if not identical, to the process that anyone goes through for any property going through design review in Glendale. So the idea is that any design review that the Historic Commission or Historic Preservation Commission is looking at, or I'm looking at it as the Historic Preservation Planner, is going to be treated in the same way as other design review in the city. And ultimately, there are two categories that each project falls into, exempt or non-exempt. An exempt project is one that can be approved at staff level without coming to the commission, and I'll kind of run you through what that means. And then a non-exempt project is one that has to be heard in public hearing by HPC.
I didn't receive that in my packet.
Oh,
It's right. It's right here.
I'm going to need to read from this one. So
It's all
Can we
here
sacrifice?
in front of me?
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
We got it.
You got yours done?
I now have it. Thank you.
Now, some of you, I know some of you, are familiar with the process of coming to the city to apply for a permit for work on a project. And I just want to take you through that. Basically, an owner in a historic district, and we're talking about Royal now, but this will apply obviously to any future districts that we have, begins the process through either a visit at the counter, we have no idea that they're coming, or they make a phone call. In either case, they're going to be dealing with the counter planner or with me or with both at this point. So, and when I say me, I'm representing Historic Preservation Planner. Very early in the process, we look at the proposal, we talk to them about, their goals and what they're going to be doing, and we determine whether this is exempt or non-exempt. And sometimes this is going to require kind of a meeting so we can really get to the meat of it. Some of the projects that are going to be coming to us are small. Someone's going to say, I want to change out 2 windows on the side of my house. Some people are going to say, I want to add a second floor to my house. So we have to be prepared for any kind of scope or scale of projects. Once we determine that a project is going to be exempt, meaning that it doesn't have to come to HPC, the person who's applying is still going to need to get a building permit. So basically, we're going to be satisfied that the project is exempt, and I guess I should jump ahead to say what that means. In a historic district, a project is exempt if it meets the guidelines, the historic district guidelines that the city has, and it doesn't exceed certain thresholds that we have on the second page that I'll get to more specifically. So certain thresholds would be if you're proposing a large or any second floor addition, you're proposing a large addition that's visible from the street, you're proposing a rear addition that's actually beyond the threshold that we have for exemption, we'll be bringing it to HPC. If we determine that it meets the guidelines and that it's exempt under any of these other thresholds, we're going to be able to stamp the drawings, we're going to be able to sign off on the application, and then it's going to still move through the building department in the same way that it always does. They'll just have the historic approval for that project.
Okay, one step.
Yeah, feel free anytime.
Okay. You keep saying we determine if it's going to be exempt or not exempt.
The planning department. The staff. It's officially the director of planning has the ability to exempt a project. As the historic preservation planner, I'll be reviewing it, but also reviewing it with staff members who are assigned to it. So all of we don't want this to just be a JPLAT reviewing historic preservation projects. It's part of the team that we have in the current planning and the comprehensive planning department.
We're qualified to review these things.
Yeah, in terms of the guidelines, I'll be involved on every single project from the beginning. At some point, our staff is going to become so well versed in the guidelines that I'm not going to need to look at every single project. I'm definitely at the beginning of the process. I'll be deeply involved in all of them.
So it's just like the design review board process right now.
We're trying to keep it exactly the same. Ultimately, there's for any exemption that is granted, there's a $59.01 fee that is assessed by the building department at the end of that process. If the project was not exempt, then we move on to step 6, and this is where the Historic Preservation Commission becomes the design review body for these projects. We'll expect an application with all supporting materials, just like we do for any other project. And like I said, this could be for someone coming in and saying, I want to put, a divided lights, a fake divided light vinyl window on the front of my house. And if I'm reviewing that with staff, we're going to say, well, that does not meet the guidelines. Are you sure you want to do that? And we'll be working with them. The whole process is to try to get people to understand the guidelines and see if there's a way that they can conform to them. If they say absolutely not, we'll be bringing it to the commission. More likely, we'll be bringing some of the bigger projects, just as with DRB, where if there's new construction, significant additions, anything like that. Once the application comes in and we have the materials, or the initial materials are submitted, a case planner will be assigned. So from that point, we'll have one of the current planning staff who's going to be attached to the project, and they're going to be walking it through the whole process. They'll be coming to you to make the presentation, just as they make presentations for DRB. And we should note that the fee for any design review for the commission is the same as for the DRB, so it's that $794.50 that the applicant has to pay before we're going to move this through the process. Ultimately, we will meet at staff level with the applicant as many times as necessary to try to make sure they understand the guidelines, the goals of the preservation program, precedent in the district, what we're looking for, what we can approve and what we can't approve. The goal, obviously, is always to try to kind of make the project as good as it can be before it comes to the commission. Once we feel that we've worked with the applicant as far as we can, we're going to set up a hearing date with the commission, and the case planner is actually going to write the staff report, and I'll obviously be involved with them to make sure that they have the lingo right and get the kind of guidelines are incorporated into the report. The goal of these reports is that they're going to be very much like the DRB reports, so we're not going to focus as much, it's not going to be a separate historic commission report. We're going to look at scale, we're going to look at texture and mass and all of the different things as appropriate to whatever project we're considering. And then at the hearing, just like with DRB, the commission will have 4 potential decisions that it makes. You either approve a project, approve it with conditions. If you approve it with conditions, those are generally conditions that you're expecting the applicant to work with staff to kind of make sure that the conditions are met, and then we can grant the permit. You're asking for a return for redesign in some cases where you think there's hope that you're going to get a better design after your comments are taken into consideration. And then there may be situations where an applicant and the commission just recognize that they're not going to come to a kind of a mutually agreeable decision, and then you can deny an application. And in all cases, an applicant has the right to appeal to City Council.
How many times after they see us?
You can only come to the commission twice. So you can come once, you can ask for redesign, they come back the second time. If we don't get either approval or approval with conditions at that hearing, then it goes to council.
Is that an automatic, or they have to file an appeal?
They have to file an appeal. So I guess you would deny it.
But if they wish to come back again one more time, is that okay? Or
I don't believe so.
If they come to the commission, they come to the first time, then they come back a second time, then they go, if it's still the same application, they would go to council.
Yeah.
However, they could also withdraw the application and then submit a new application at some point.
What's the time period there? I thought you can't submit the same 6 months, or?
I don't believe there's a time limit at that point. It's simply a new application, but then they do have to pay a whole new round of fees and all that stuff. I'd like to add 2 other comments to it. I think it's 2 other, maybe 3 other comments to what Jay had sort of outlined. As Jay mentioned, the process is intended to be essentially exactly like the design review board or design review process anywhere in the city, except in historic districts. The Historic Preservation Commission functions as the design review body. So therefore, we're under the same, in this case, we're under the same code, design review authority code, that anything outside of a historic district is subject to, which is chapter 30.47 in the code. That covers design review authority. So that's where a lot of these thresholds and other kind of criteria are laid out. The other aspect that's important to remember about that is that the 4 possible outcomes is that planning staff will be giving the commission a recommendation. We do that right now for projects that go to design review board and to the redevelopment agency. We recommend what action they should take, and so when the first project you see in a historic district comes to you for design review approval, staff will be making recommendation, approval with conditions, or return for redesign, as well as providing what we call a draft record of decision, which is a kind of written explanation as to why we think the commission should take that course of action. And then, of course, you can debate that and modify the language, but I just wanted to highlight, essentially it's the design review process, except that HPC is a design review authority. So if you've been watching or familiar with the way we've been handling design review over the past year, it'd be very similar.
I have a question.
Sure.
Small question. If you have a contributor, applicant comes and his home is classified as a contributor, comes to staff level, is it normal that, depending, I guess, on the extent of the improvement, that staff could review that and approve it or deny it without it coming to this body?
If it meets the guidelines, we can approve it without it coming here. Because we're at the very beginning of the process, the guidelines are simply guidelines. They're not hard and fast rules, so there will be some interpretation in them. We're going to err on the side of bringing things to the commission so that we can start setting kind of a pattern of precedent of commission decisions for these things.
Go ahead, Ms. Lanigan.
My question is going to be, variances in the historic district, will they come to us first, or will a variance be taken to the zoning administrator after coming to us?
That's an Allen question.
You're referring to, say, use variances or standard variances?
Standard variances, exactly.
Right. My understanding is that they would go to the zoning administrator.
First.
And typically they go first to the zoning administrator before they come to the design review authority.
Will the zoning administrator then make reference to the district guidelines so that there's not a conflict in the decision-making?
That's an interesting question. We'd have to
I think
dig into that.
it's an important question for me.
Well, if I may interject, because right now if you go through a variance, part of the condition is, if it says, exempt or non-exempt, you go to design review board. But then in this case, I think it says go to HPC. Correct?
It does.
Yeah, and so...
But I think Commissioner Landrigan's concerned, the potential for a variance to conflict with the design guidelines is there.
Is there.
And I think we'll have to talk to the zoning administrator to make sure that we're, involved in her decision-making.
I'm looking to try to make it the least painful for the applicant. I think it's already kind of confusing. I think that we need to have as much committee in our determinations, whether it's from the zoning administrator's viewpoint and then the guidelines here. So if the findings for a variance exist that could be in conflict with the guidelines, I think that needs to be looked at and maybe addressed before that happens, so that the applicant is not put in a catch-22.
It's an excellent question, because that's what I was trying to ask when Cottage Grove, one-car garage versus two-car garage, because with one-car garage, you're really limited.
Right.
So you have to go see the zoning administrator to get a variance if you're adding over certain square footage.
But you can remodel your garage?
And you have to expand it. Or,
You have to expand it.
Or tear it down, or
As long as
put
you
a
stay
new one.
within the criteria of the guidelines.
Guidelines, right.
What's wrong with that?
Well, you can also get a variance to keep your
To keep
one-car
it.
garage
Correct.
if you needed to, but I do think we would like them to work in tandem and in concert and not at cross purposes.
I think, Commissioner Landrigan, that's a point very well taken, and we'll look into that. And if you'd like, we'd come back and talk to you about how that process might unfold if we encounter that kind of condition.
I'd like
situation.
you to do that if you. I think that would be really helpful.
But I think we should definitely look into that and understand that process and explain it
Thank you.
best we can.
I think you answered George's. Answered your...
Did you want to ask a question?
Well, I don't know which one was it. I have so many of them, but I think...
Yeah, and do you want to, we do have a second page with the exemptions. if
Right,
anything-
that's what I was going to say. It's very clear. It says here, if you add over 200, under 200, you're exempt. That's in the front.
200
Addition.
to the front.
So staff has to make that determination whether it's compatible or not.
All right.
If you add more than 200, you automatically come to us, just like the RB.
Okay.
Then the same thing happens if you're under 700, it's in the back.
Okay.
Then you can get exempt, provided it meets the, then over 700, it comes to us. So it's basically the same as what you have today in design
I
review.
think you answered my
That's exactly correct. The thresholds for design review are
Same thing.
exactly the same, because the underlying zoning in a historic district hasn't changed.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
typically R1 or R1R.
But I think they're going to be more cautious on the 200 square feet additions. I think staff is going to be very critical on that versus,
Whether they come here?
well, if it's under 200, it's in the front. They have to see them. If they don't agree with the applicant, then they have a right to come to us, correct?
Right. Yeah, it's hard for me at this point to imagine the 200 square foot addition on the front of a house that's going to meet the guidelines, but everything is possible. We're also looking at things, an addition technically to the side of the house could theoretically extend the front facade along one of its facades. We'll be looking at that as a front facade addition also.
Yeah, especially in this last case we had, was it an Imperial or no, before last? And it has 3 streets. I mean, basically, he's limited in what he's going to do on the 3 sides.
I just wanted to, and I don't want to belabor it, but I don't want to belabor it, but the question I had mentioned earlier about being a contributor, and you said staff would look at that and they would make a determination whether they can rule on that or make their judgment, or will it come to HPC?
And we'll be doing the same with non-contributors.
And non-contributors, sure. Probably all in the same bag. If a person wants to add a second story and it's a contributor, I'm putting it in that category of contributor because it does have some criteria already attached to it when it comes to the city. Will the staff actually be able to handle something like that, or would that automatically trigger it coming here?
Those are second-story additions automatically come to HPC,
Okay.
but before it comes to you, we're going to be working with the applicant to come up with the design that hopefully we can recommend to you. If we think there's any way that second floor additions could be appropriate in whatever district we're looking at, we'd work with them to bring it to that point. And if we throw up our hands and say we can't do it, we'll recommend denial or modification, and then you will decide.
Okay, good. That's good. Thank you,
It's
Jay.
no different than what it is today.
If I may, though, Chairman Marion, make one other final comment. What is a little bit different about design review in historic districts, or will be different about design review in historic districts versus the rest of the city and the design review board, is that if you're a follower of design review board, you know that the buzzword is compatibility. That's the kind of defining measure for how the board makes their decisions and how staff analyzes particular projects, is under this kind of somewhat nebulous word, compatibility. In historic districts, I think we will find that that word is much easier to understand for two reasons. One is that we have fairly good design guidelines for historic districts that are much better than the design guidelines we have for non-historic districts, other single-family homes. And then secondly, because we have fairly thorough historic resource surveys, we actually can define what is the neighborhood we're measuring compatibility with very precisely, and through the survey we actually have some very precise boundaries and defining characteristics of that neighborhood. So I think the question of what is compatible in a historic district is going to be a lot easier to define and understand than it is in non-historic districts where we don't have those kinds of tools available. So I think it may actually turn out that its design review process might be a little more predictable in a historic district than it is elsewhere in the city.
It's true. Right, Commissioner Lander.
So my question then will be, if a person is going to submit to the design review through the HPC, they will prepare an application that is identical to the DRB application, so they would have the same plot plans, they would have adjacent properties on there. Are there going to be some recommendations on that application that would be more appropriate to the HPC's review? I think we might want to look at it and just see if there is, because as you're saying, and certainly the contextual neighborhood relationship where neighborhood adjacencies, and especially for a non-contributor, we might be able to give them some requirements ahead of time that are not in the packet right now that would make it a lot easier on us to review it.
Yeah, I think...
As a former design review board member.
Are you saying we want to see the application?
Well, we would get the application, I would assume, just as a design review board would. But in the packet that the design review board has, if you'll look at what is given out, some of the elements there might suggest that historically significant details be part of the application package, which are not part of what the design review board asks for at the moment. They don't deal with a historic property. They don't also deal with the historic context of a district. One of the things I always felt, this is going to sound like a little personal soap opera, but one of the things I really felt that was missing in the design review process is asking for a complete streetscape that's panoramic, so that you can see what the context is and how it's going to change. And just as a photo montage, and I think in the districts that might be very helpful for us to have an existing district already on file that you can just bring out, and we would say, here's what the district's streetscape looks like, this is where it is, this is where it's going to change. I just see it as an opportunity to deal specifically with the uniqueness of this. It is slightly different.
It is slightly different, Chairwoman Landrigan, and I think...
Not yet.
Well, what I was going to say is what I think one of the fundamental kind of points that has been emphasized in the process of creating the historic district ordinance is that it would not require additional fees or additional work by being in a historic district than you would experience otherwise going through a design review process. So I think we'd be reluctant to suggest to add on additional requirements as part of the design review application because you're in a historic district. That being said, I think it makes sense to, one, highly recommend to applicants that they may wish to provide that additional detail. It's in their best interest oftentimes to provide additional information as opposed to the minimum. And then secondly, I think as we move forward with these historic districts and the process of staff evaluating proposals, we'll probably end up with a lot of the material you're asking for that staff will have available to make our analysis of proposals, like the streetscape you were talking about.
They're small enough now that it might be something that would be really helpful to add to whenever we make a district, that we just have that on hand so that it can be brought out.
With our historic resource reports being available online, any designer working for an applicant will have access to photographs of every house on the block and the opposite block, so they could even use that, just taking it off the web. So,
but we do require part of the application to provide photographs, recent photographs of the neighborhood, 300 linear feet district.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so
Yeah, we do that.
we do that already. I think it's a good idea. I've done it before in other cities where you draw the actual elevations of, let's say,
Superimpose it.
3-4 houses this way, 3-4 houses that way, and you put your new house or whatever, then you probably can see it better contextually. I think that's a great idea, but I don't know if we're going to burden the applicants with more requirements.
Right.
I think it's upon them to give us that to justify their case.
Yeah, that's absolutely what I was suggesting, that as you may have done to bolster your own case, it's in your best interest. Somebody coming to HPC might choose to do that as in addition to what they're required because
because if they're coming up with a less sensitive design that we're looking, I think that's the best way to justify it. Then we can see the mass, the scale, the roof lines and all that, all in one
In concert
together. Yeah. I mean, again, we might ask. I mean, we could leave it open, ask for that information if they don't want to provide it, or maybe staff will suggest that maybe you should do that. But while they're working.
Yeah, for any significant project, we'll have a lot of interaction with the applicants before it comes to hearing, so we'll try to make the package as, useful as possible, and as far as the applicant can take it, or is willing to.
I've done that 10 years ago, where I drew the whole block. Literally, I was part of the requirement.
Did you put it on DVD?
No, that was hand-drawn, all hand-drawn, no cat.
I think we'll be rating Mr. Marian's archives.
No, it's okay. Anyway, thank you very much. Any other questions, Commissioner Stefani?
I just have one quick one. I probably might have the answer for this myself, but let me ask Jay. Alan, either way. If you, in these historic districts that we've been reviewing, we've noticed that somewhat like we did today, there's one where some of the houses are not considered contributors, and others are. Let's say, for example, one of the non-contributors comes before us and wants to do a major remodel project. Does staff review that as far as what the historic makeup of the rest of the homes in that district look like, or can he come in and does he have more leeway to design something with a little more flexibility than normal, or what?
The review of a non-contributor is going to be similar to the review of a house that's in a non-designated area in Glendale, but it's looked at in the context of its neighborhood, which is the historic district. So we're going to look at the same issues of, is the mass appropriate, is the scale appropriate, are the materials appropriate. There are guidelines in the historic district guidelines for non-contributing buildings. They're purposefully open-ended because there is some more flexibility for those houses, but not so much that you're going to have a 3-story.
So in other words, if this district is designated French Revival or Spanish Colonial Revival, it doesn't necessarily mean that non-contributor that's in that district has to design a home that follows that.
No. We're open to all sorts of design. We want it to be appropriate and, as Alan said, compatible, whatever that means.
Very catchy words, buzzwords.
Yeah, but in the case where, like Royal, there's already 4 or 5 different styles there.
And where we have modern-style houses on Royal Boulevard now.
Yeah.
But their
non-contributors.
massing is very consistent.
Yeah, that's ultimately mass and setback are kind of the key features that help things kind of blend in.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, we're on the last item, 7C.
And this one is just evident on your agenda. We, both of our November and the December hearings both fall during holiday weeks. So we're consolidating our meeting till December 8th. We don't have anything pending that will be affected by that. So if you all can note that we're meeting at 2 o'clock on December 8th.
I can already note that I won't be in attendance.
Okay. Anyone else have?
I have a conflict.
Why don't you?
Yeah, she's gone for a while.
Everyone else available?
Yes.
And then at least we have quorum at this point.
At this point I am, but could change.
You will call us and let us know, or we will acknowledge.
You'll get a packet, I'll give you email reminders, you'll get the whole
A lot
thing.
of stuff to come through, yeah.
Timely packets received. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I did want to make, since are we going to?
Yeah, we're going to go to 8 comments from commissioners, and I'll open it up for you.
I'm happy to save a bunch of trees in Glendale by not having so much paper. If you would like to give it to me digitally, I would be more than happy with that.
Do we have precedent for that, Ellen, of not doing that for a reason? But I've heard that.
It's on the city's website. We send it to graphics.
That is true, yeah.
But it doesn't go on the website until...
It doesn't go up on the website until maybe the Tuesday or Wednesday, so you wouldn't get it as early.
Yeah, that's
I think the biggest reason we haven't done that is because some of the material, like the applications we receive for nominations, are coming to us in hard copy format, and we don't send it to the city graphics department to be scanned until the week before the hearing, so you'd be getting it a little bit on a delayed.
And I was going to say that the scanned photographs are really terrible, so it would have to improve the scanning of the photographs.
Yeah, I mean...
Talk to graphics.
Yeah, graphics, I believe, just has a gigantic scanning machine that they just scan, they scan council reports.
They're just black blobs.
One thing that I'm
run
considering...
It's essentially a Xerox machine, as far as I can tell.
They are. There's not a single defining feature on any of them, which is really unfortunate because those are the things that we just sort of are celebrating, that they aren't on the website.
Well, I'll look at that. I haven't seen the black blobs, so I'll definitely check. But one thing, it's easy for us. It's not an ordinance change or anything else to change our submission policies. And I've been thinking that if we ask for a fully electronic submission,
I think that would be
what
great.
we don't have right now is a nomination form that you can type into and then save. So we need to get that first, and then.
May I interject, Mr. Chair?
Of course.
You said no electronic? I thought the DRB requires a PDF file when you submit.
Yeah, well, we don't at this point, so we definitely...
Yeah, you're correct. We require PDF files for DRB applications, which would obviously affect future design review applications in historic districts, but for historic...
Glendale Register.
The Glendale Register nominations, we're not requiring electronic at this point, but we can look into that for
So next year.
So you're not initiative for next year.
I did start double-siding your things recently.
No, I love that. Thank you. I mean,
Well, I don't mind getting some of the report on paper, but I still like to see it so I can make my comments. It's kind of, I can bring it to the meeting.
You can print anything out that we send you?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Actually, people who are absent, or away or out of the office, if you can electronically send these things out, it makes it much easier.
I
don't think doing PDF is very hard. I mean, if you're doing it on WordPerfect or whatever, it's just very simple to do PDF, but we don't want to burden the applicant.
We can, a goal for 2009.
Yeah.
that might be nice.
Well, I have a comment. I want to thank staff, Jay and Alan Loomis also, and Mr. Valenzuela, being part of the Royal Boulevard work. I think you did a great job.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marty, and I think it's appropriate to acknowledge Assistant Director Tim Foy, who
yes, absolutely.
Actually was part of the team that started this
correct,
process.
Very correct. He was the one who started the whole, he was there from the beginning. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any comments from Commissioner Stefani?
Well, it's just thank you from all of you guys, and it's really, you did a great job with the package. I was impressed with the pictures this time. It was really informative, and thanks a lot.
Thank you. And I have one comment about that. I mentioned it earlier, but you said it requires an ordinance change, if,
To speed it up.
to speed it up a little bit?
Mhm.
I mean, how do we go
Well,
on?
the one thing that doesn't require an ordinance change that we're considering again for the next round of applications, we don't have any pending applications, but we've heard there's interest in a few neighborhoods. We're planning to issue a request for qualifications to the group of consultants in Southern California who potentially can prepare historic resource reports. The biggest, longest step in the process is getting contracts approved, going through the interviews, sending out RFPs to all of them. And if we had a pool of pre-qualified consultants, a short list, that would shave several months at least off of the process, and that's something we can do without an ordinance change.
Okay. Well, at least whatever you do will help the process.
That's definitely in the works. So.
And does the city already have a process in place where you shortlist people and then you can ask for those shortlisted to give you cost proposals, or do you ask for cost proposals?
We would have our own short list. Well, we couldn't do that because theoretically they could be doing, a huge historic district, a small historic district, or possibly something else if it ever came under our kind of bailiwick. So the idea would be to pre-qualify them and then get cost proposals for the individual projects as they come up. So there'll still be that step.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else? Or
Are we
motion to adjourn?
Yes.
We're adjourned.
We are.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.